How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about Tales from the Crypt presents Ritual from 2002, directed by Avi Nesher, and starring Jennifer Grey, Craig Sheffer, and Tim Curry. This movie is about a doctor named Alice who uses some experimental medicine that she doesn't have permission to use to try to save this dying girl. It unfortunately does not work, and she gets suspended for 2 years. She's looking for employment and finds a job in Jamaica. She travels down there. There's these two brothers that own a farm, a big, farm, and one of them is feeling really sick, and they don't quite know what it is, but the brother who's sick has his own theories. He thinks he's a zombie, or at least becoming one. He kind of wanders around and he goes places at night and he doesn't know where he's going, and he thinks someone has put a curse on him. And on top of that, while this is all going on, there's also been some murders. Some people are getting killed with a machete. And on top of that, if that wasn't all worse, the sickness may be spreading, and some people are starting to have lots and lots of hallucinations and not knowing what's real and crazy sequences. So a lot is going on, and she has to figure out what's up with this, what the plot is, because there is a very big tangled plot. Going in with the biggest pros with this one is the setting. It is set in Jamaica, and also not too much of the touristy spots. This isn't just a bunch of people just partying in Jamaica. The farm is a little bit out of the way, and you get to see some of rural Jamaica too, which is always nice, because the movies where people just go to like the touristy spots and party, those are okay, but to actually see more of the real country, and I believe this was shot in Jamaica too, so big props to that. The cast has a really good camaraderie. They're all pretty good actors, and you get to see these people kind of in an out-of-the-way spot in the world hanging out with each other, and then it feels good and real. And while we're talking about the cast, I should bring up Tim Curry, Pennywise himself. Tim Curry is always good to see. Same with a lot of these famous horror actors. You see a familiar face and you're like, that's really cool. I'm glad to see him there. He's not the biggest character in this movie. He has a fairly good part. But a lot of times when you get, kind of these low-budget horror movies, they get a famous actor and they're just in there for like 1 or 2 scenes, but they really play it up and advertise. It's like, hey, check this out. But Tim Curry in this movie actually does have a fair part. He's in there for a good bit, and it's always great to see him. He plays this doctor who kind of fell out with his field, and now he's doing primarily vet work, and he's also kind of a womanizer, and people are like, hey, you gotta be more serious. He's not got a super great moral compass on him. But when it comes to the flaws with this movie, I do want to say the hallucination stuff is what's going to get a lot of people. First off, it's, a lot of the hallucinations, there is a fair bit of a CGI, and this is 2002 CGI, and that's, 18 years ago. A lot of it doesn't really hold up super well. You also get hallucinations as an excuse to have a scare sequence when there logically wouldn't be one in the plot, and they also use them as an excuse to kind of go too far and then take it back, so you may see something horrible happening, but that's okay. It's just an hallucination. We can go back to where we should be in the plot right after, and the whole, taking something back in a movie where it's like, no, the plot didn't do that. But that's going to get a lot of people, but I don't want to tear on it too much, because this movie actually is pretty good. You may not expect it, But it's actually a fairly good plot. You get a lot of characters working against each other, kind of in typical Tales from the Crypt fashion, a bunch of people greedy and trying to get one up on another. And I will say, I'm not going to spoil anything, but when the last plot element is revealed, you actually say, wow, that makes a fair bit of sense, because a bunch of these other things, you get like low-budget movies where there's a bunch of moving pieces. There's usually some elements that don't make sense, but for this, when they actually get right to the end, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Although I will say that when you see one of the villains, the villain has a pretty understandable motive, yet they actually turn around and get a pretty dark ending, and it's kind of like one of the last things the movie shows. You're like, ooh, that was dark for that character. Oops. But I guess that does happen in Tales from the Crypt, right? You get some people, and the people, they have a pretty dark ending sometimes. But anyway, overall, this is a good movie, and it's kind of surprising this is a good movie, because this is one that probably up front you see some red flags for. The big one is this was not originally going to be a Tales from the Crypt movie. It kind of became a Tales from the Crypt movie late into its production cycle, but yet that still, it fits. When you're picking something to be part of your franchise, you want to make sure it has the right tone, and thankfully this does. It's a little out there, and the characters, conniving against each other, and there are some pretty cool moments, like there's this one guy at the very beginning who kind of, melts, and you're like, okay, that's a cool, fun, gory Tales from the Crypt thing, And I have a feeling if it was Tales from the Crypt from the beginning, there'd probably be more humor and more over-the-top stuff. But for something that became Tales from the Crypt relatively late on, it's good that they made it work as well as they did, And yeah, it fits good enough. The Crypt Keeper puppet, because they filmed that stuff pretty late, they use what I think is the puppet they use for like the DVD stuff. It's a much simpler puppet, with the face, and I think it actually has a real person's hands, So that is one of the things, you're like, oh man, the regular Tales from the Crypt puppet, that's a pretty good, well, it's basically a robot, a pretty good puppet, and you're kind of like, okay, well, this is the low-budget puppet, and, it's kind of sad they didn't get the good one, but hey, the Crypt Keeper's there, it's always good to see John Cassier, and then, plus you get the Crypt Keeper in Jamaica, hanging out by a pool with all these ladies, and he's got his dreadlocks on, so he's always fun to see. But another big difference between this and typical Tales from the Crypt is this is not based on the EC comics. All the other stories in Tales from the Crypt pretty much just based on old EC comics, This one based on a old horror movie, actually. This is inspired by I Walked with a Zombie. It's a remake, but I think they changed a whole bunch of it. But it's kind of weird to see Tales from the Crypt doing a remake of, I think, a 1940s movie. And I kind of wish they kept the I Walked with a Zombie title. That, would seem more like a creep show title, but Ritual is more serious and new. But, yeah, it is interesting to see it coming from different source material. But that being said, you see all this stuff, you're like, oh wow, this is weird and different, and you'd think it'd be actually pretty bad, but it's not. Now, this isn't amazing, and the thing with Tales from the Crypt is a lot of Tales from the Crypt stuff is actually pretty amazing, and this is just pretty good what, you're like, it's not, that super high standard. But that being said, though, this is still pretty good. For a movie that was direct-to-DVD in a lot of places, for that standard, this is actually really great. It's a fun Jamaican horror movie with voodoo type stuff, although technically it's Obeah, which is like the Jamaican version of voodoo. And I do want to say though, why this is pretty good, if you are interested in the traditional voodoo type zombies, the pre-Romero stuff, definitely check out The Serpent and the Rainbow, the Wes Craven movie. It's one of the movies after Romero introduced his zombies, one of the few movies that goes back and does the classic voodoo zombies, and that one's shot in Haiti. That's pretty cool. I definitely, if you're into this, check out that other movie as well. But anyway, way better than I thought. You know, not amazing, but still a pretty good Tales from the Crypt movie. Anyway, I'll be back with more horror stuff later. I do pretty much 95% horror on this channel. To everyone who's watched this long, thank you for watching. And to everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you for liking and subscribing. You really are helping this channel out. And I'll see you guys again very soon in the next video. Have a good day.